Good evening, everyone. Getting situated here, setting up. Have a cup of tea. Still steaming. Ooh, can you see that in the video? Maybe not so well. Hot cup of mint tea. So, one of the big things about moving from Cancun, which was this land of perpetual sun and continual 95-degree temperatures, was here in Mexico City. And it's actually, the daytimes are, upper 60s. Is that how they say it? Yeah, upper 60s, low 70s recently. Outside, it's great. But my living room / office where I'm at, it stays chilly enough that I am in a sweater and sweatpants and slippers pretty much all day. And when we go outside, we're in shorts and t-shirts, and you're sweating by the time you get back. But after about 20 minutes in the house, it gets a little chilly. So I've been drinking actually lots of tea recently, coffee as well, but hot drinks, and we've been making soups and stews and stuff, which is a lot of fun. Because these are things we just haven't really enjoyed a lot for the last 8 years in Cancun because it was too damn hot to eat stews or drink teas. So tonight, what are we talking about? Tonight is the 10th episode of Mondays in MMORPGs. So the blog post went live today. As typical of this particular series, the reactions were mixed, and we got quite a bit of coverage across the media outlets for MMORPGs. Gated content is something that it's not really unfamiliar territory. There's actually gated content in a lot of games, but these days it's been kind of watered down. The gated content that exists in today's games is not the same as gated content, say, 10 years ago or even 15 years ago. Going over to look at, say, World of Warcraft, gated content really only exists these days in the sense that you need to be a certain level to get into a zone. Looking at games like, for example, right now I'm playing in the early morning hours, I'm playing Star Wars The Old Republic when I wake up with my breakfast. And even when I first started playing that game, which I think it's about 5 years old now, somewhere around 4 or 5 years old, I think it's 5. Even just a short period of time ago when it launched, there were aspects of gated content in the sense that, right when you get off the starter planet, there was I think it was called the Essel's ship, which you needed a group to go through. And you didn't have to do that. They gave you an option to go take a shuttle on your own. If you took the shuttle, you didn't get the epic loot, you didn't get the experience bonuses, you didn't get any of the social points, you didn't get all the cool things that you would get by going off and doing the group encounter. But if you wanted to do the group encounter, you had to have a group. Now, I ran into because I've been running through the game the past few days, you can go in to the group encounter and you can choose what's called story mode, and they give you this buffed up robot that comes along with you and heals you and does tons of damage and allows you to basically wade through what would otherwise be a group-based encounter. And the same thing with Lord of the Rings Online. It used to be where if you wanted to do the epic book quests, you had to have a group. And at some point down the line when the game went free to play, they changed it, and now you have this little stone that you can click on, which gives you, 20,000 hit points and allows you to do these encounters that were originally based around groups on your own. So we can see examples of gated content in MMORPGs today, but they've kind of fallen out from what they used to be. They've been watered down. So when we started talking about how we wanted to look at gated content, did we want to use gated content, etc., it was a decision where we kind of looked at it and said, well, we look at gated content kind of as a way to tier the difficulty. And to have certain components of the game where you need a certain crafting skill or a certain mechanical skill, or you need a certain class, or you need a certain number of people, or you need to do a certain set of things to be able to progress. We really liked that from the early days of EverQuest, and even though we're primarily based on a tabletop game, we keep coming back to EverQuest 1 as a primary source of MMORPG specific references because it was a game that did it so well in our opinion. And it's one of the reasons we're off playing on the Agnar server right now with our Saga Lucimia community, and even though there are components of EQ now that are completely watered down. Like, there's no more corpse runs. You don't really have to worry about experience loss anymore. It's not a big deal. I mean, you could still, de-level, but it takes a lot to really get to that point. Even though the game has changed a lot, there are still some components. And one of the reasons we chose the Agnar server to do our Saga of Leucemia community is because of the fact that it's the Planes of Power progression server. And one of the things that was so awesome about the Lucklin and the Planes of Power progression, those two expansions in particular, relied on getting keyed or flagged and attuned in order to do certain raids and certain steps of those quest lines as you progress through the ranks. And it's not stuff that was at the lower tiers of the game. These are absolutely the upper tiers. This is when in-game started to become a big thing, more so than in Velius per se, because Velius didn't really have, there was faction-based stuff, but it wasn't as hardcore as needing to get keyed for Sra, for example, or needing to go through all of the planes in a very specific order to get to the plane of time in Planes of Power expansion. So when we started looking at how we wanted to do gated content in the Saga of Leucemia, we kind of looked at those two expansions, the Lucklin expansion and the Planes of Power expansion, as two prime examples of gated content or keyed content, needing to attune yourselves in order to move through content and progress. And that's a way to inspire people as well to group up with each other, because these are things that you can't do on your own. It's pretty easy to get together with one or two other people and go out and say, kill wolves and get pelts in order to do crafting, or go, hunt down a bandit camp so you can get bandit scalps to turn into some NPC. These aren't things that are, gated in the sense. They don't require a special key or a special attunement or any sort of special faction to complete. But when we start getting into how we wanted to look at the Volume 1 quest line progressing in our game, we said gated content is the way to go. We want to actually have content that progresses from a point A to a point B. That being said, there are some pretty tricky things about that, because we just ran into this in EverQuest 2 last year when we decided that we wanted to go through that game with our Saga of Leucemia community and play through the mythical content with the Kunark expansion. And one of the things we came across fairly early on was a quest line where we were working. I can't remember off the top of my head what those quest lines are called. The Heritage Quests, I think is what they're called. So we were doing these Heritage Quests to get points for the guild and level up the guild. And we came across a Heritage Quest which needed a very specific crafted component, which needed a very specific harvested item and a very specific crafter to make it, and a very specific recipe as well. Now, that's an example of gated content. But the problem was that we were coming into a game where that quest line was 10 years old. And at that point in time on that server, there was no one available who could create that item for us. And if we wanted to go ahead and level up our own crafting in order to get to that point, which is absolutely a viable option, the issue is that the time it takes to level up, which is not necessarily an issue, but when we're coming into a game where it's 10 years down the road and we were just doing this for fun, we come across a quest line where we needed to progress. We couldn't find a crafter on the server. We went to the forums. We went all the other places. We looked for several weeks. And eventually got to the point where we said, you know what? It's not a necessary quest in order to progress through the mythical content. It's just a heritage quest to do for experience points and status points. So screw it. We're just going to delete it from our quest logs and move on. So when we started talking about gated content, one of the conversations that came up very early on was, if we're going to have gated content, we have to make sure that there are multiple ways that players can progress through the various stages of the progression, so that they don't get into a specific encounter or area of a quest line where they just can't progress because they don't have the right person, or they don't play at the right time of day for their mates to be on. or they're playing at a weird time like 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever the case may be, we need to make sure that players can progress through the content through a variety of different ways to make sure that they're not blocked in any specific way. We also had to look at it and say, if we're going to use gated content, we think it's fine to use gated content for the Volume 1 storyline, which is a very specific storyline. And it's very specific. We're calling that our epic quest. It very much in pretty much every way possible, without directly copying. We're definitely taking a page from the Lord of the Rings Online book, in the sense that we feel that the way they did the book quests was a very good thing. We think that that was very well done. Even though the way it is now is not great, the way it was done originally. And that's one of the reasons why, if you watch the streams that I'm doing on Tuesdays and Thursday nights here on this Twitch channel, our group and our guild is playing through the storyline content as a group. Even though you can do it solo, we're doing it as a group. And that's how we're going to be doing the quest line in our game, the Volume 1 storyline. But that's only going to take up, I said the other day when I was recording the video for the blog post this morning, that's probably only going to be 10 to 15% of the game. What about the other 85 to 90% of the game? Is it going to be gated? How is that going to work? And the easiest answer to that question is not really, no. The other 85% of the game, we're looking at having be far more open, and we won't be relying on gated content so much. And the reason for that is because we don't really want to limit players from being able to do all these cool things. That being said, the Volume 1 storyline, and I'm sure you guys got this from the blog post that I wrote, the Volume 1 storyline is akin to the X Games or the Olympics. If you're going to want to progress through the Volume 1 storyline, it's not going to be something you can do with a pickup group. It's not going to be something that you can do on a whim. It's not going to be something that you can do just with anybody. You are going to need a guild. You're going to need to be able to play proficiently, I would say beyond the average level, because it will require aspects of upper echelon gaming, in the sense that it's going to require rating. Now, I'd also like to take a step back from that and say, at what point in time does 10% of a game being related to rating make a game hardcore? Because there's been some outlets who continually talk about how our game is like the most hardcore MMORPG being developed right now, and we just don't get it, because we're designing our game for players who only play 2 to 3 hour sessions 2, 3, 4 times a week. This is not a game that's being designed for players who raid 10 hours a day, which people still do in EverQuest 1, even, surprisingly, and World of Warcraft and beyond. But raiding is not hardcore if it's done in small chunks. Now, the raiding in EverQuest 1, when you used to have to get together and spend 10 hours to try to take down a raid boss, that's definitely hardcore. But when you start looking at persistent zones and persistent gameplay and being able to save your progress, I think that's something that World of Warcraft EverQuest 2 did very well, in the sense that you can go into a zone with your guild, you can play for 2 hours, stop, come back 3 days later, and pick up where you left off and still continue on. That's not hardcore in any way. Group-based gaming is not hardcore. It's just getting together. I've gone back to this multiple times. Getting together with a group of other people to play a tabletop game is a group-based element. It's a group-based game right there. That's not hardcore. People don't call tabletop gaming hardcore. People aren't watching Twitch streams of people playing Dungeons & Dragons saying, "Oh my god, that's so hardcore." People don't do that, because group-based gaming in and of itself is not hardcore. So what we're doing here is not hardcore. It's just group-based gaming. It's community-based gaming. But the Volume 1 storyline only makes up a small percentage of the overall game, so there's a hell of a lot more that people can go out there and do that doesn't have any sort of progression steps required, no attunement required, no keys or anything like that. But for the Volume 1 storyline, there definitely will be. So we look at that like I said, like the X Games or the Olympics. If you're going to get to that level, you're going to need to be in a guild. You're going to need to be able to play proficiently. You're going to need to have the best gear. You're going to have resists. You're going to have to worry about those types of things. But if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. There's a whole other game to play. There's a whole other world out there where you can go out and do dungeons and crafting and adventuring and exploration and role play and all these other things while the world around you continues to evolve. It's no different than me right now sitting at my home office doing a live Twitch stream. I'm doing this because I enjoy doing this. I'm doing this because I am building a game. I like role playing. I like game development. I like all these things. But I'm not a professional streamer. I'm not here with sponsors. I'm not making $50,000 a month on stream. I'm not participating in events. I'm not going and gaming at a professional level. That and what those people are doing doesn't affect what I'm doing on Twitch. And the example that I used in my blog post was bicycles. I like to ride bikes, but I like to ride bikes on the weekends. Maybe a couple times a week with my wife. I do it for fun, maybe for exercise a little bit, but mostly for fun. The people who are doing it at a professional level as a career, it doesn't affect me whatsoever. And the fact that they're doing that and that I can go watch them do that is amazing. And I can sit back and go, holy crap, that's amazing what they're doing. I could be awed by that. I can sit in wonderment and say that's really cool. I can appreciate that, and they deserve the accolades for pursuing cycling at that level. And I the same way when it comes to video games. Like personally right now, I'm not raiding, but that's because I'm very much involved in the development of this game. So even though I play several hours per night, I'm not doing any sort of raiding because I only have 4 nights a week that I play. We've been talking about raiding. I know it's come up a couple of times in EverQuest, but the issue with EverQuest is that it's not persistent. So it's not like EverQuest 2 or World of Warcraft where you can actually do it in small chunks. So that's one of the things we're making sure that we do when we're developing our game, is to make sure that the content, even though it is gated, even though it does have progression steps, it's going to be done in such a way that you can do it in small chunks of time, spread out over many days, potentially weeks, which allows anybody to come in and do it in a very casual manner, playing a couple hours here, a couple hours there. That's not hardcore. That's not challenging in the sense that you have to put a lot of time aside. You can do that fairly easily. I was reading through the commentary on Massively OP, my favorite site on the internet. And there was some commentary being posted about people claiming that gated content was what killed WildStar. And I didn't really get into WildStar. I didn't play it when it came out. I don't remember why. I was busy with something else. Excuse me. Let me find the comment real quick. Some people are saying that this was what killed WildStar. And then someone came back, Robert Mann replied and said, no, actually WildStar's issues, I think they were only partially related to requiring, having gated content and needing so many players and stuff. The graphics weren't aligned to the hardcore crowd. The 4 societal aspects was terrible. And the game flubbed a number of other critical issues. Excuse me. I'm reading all of this. Anyway, there's been lots of, people saying WildStar failed because of rating, because of gated content. And then someone else in the same thread said, but if you use that as an example, then why hasn't World of Warcraft failed? Because World of Warcraft is still very much, you can go to Twitch, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Facebook, you can go anywhere you want, and there are still many, many, many hardcore guilds who raid full-time, 7 days a week in World of Warcraft, and they're fielding, dozens of people in these raids. So if raiding kills games, like people are claiming raiding killed WildStar, why hasn't raiding killed World of Warcraft? And World of Warcraft is by no means a hardcore game. No one on the planet would dare put the word hardcore next to World of Warcraft. So people who say that hardcore, it's a funny word. In any case, as far as gated content goes, we love it. We think that it has a place for the storyline. We think it has a place in inspiring people to get together and do things beyond what they can achieve on their own. But we're also talking about doing things creatively in the sense that there are going to be world server events that require the community to come together as a whole. And I can't give away everything right now, but I can say one of the things we're looking at, which I mentioned on the Massively OP thread, is we've been talking a lot about, you know, limited fast travel. So you think about the teleport rings, or the teleport spires in EverQuest. You know, those were only scattered throughout the world in various places. Especially in the early days, there was, you know, a few of them, and we're looking at potentially placing, you know, maybe half a dozen across the landscape. But they won't be able to be used right away. So we're thinking about the way that we're going to have that, because magic doesn't exist in our world, so we only have relic items. So if we're looking at these giant spires that have been sitting there for centuries, they've probably, you know, they might have a little bit of a charge left in them, and not enough of a charge to allow them to transport players. So we've been talking about how can we creatively come up with a server event, with a world event, where the community comes together and figures out how to reactivate the portals, and then that allows the server to have some limited fast travel for a limited amount of time, and then it would deplete the charges, and you know, we'd be back to ground zero, and we'd have to, you know, have another creative event where the server community has to come together as a whole to do something else. But we're looking at doing things like that, where we're going to create scenarios where the server community has to come together to do something. And that in and of itself is far greater than just, you know, needing to get, say, 15, 20 people together for a small raid encounter, or 40 people for a big raid encounter. You know, this would be something where, and we have no idea how we're going to do it yet. It might be based on a percentage of the server population. It might be based on time. We're not sure how we're going to do it yet, but we are looking at ways that we can have the whole server participating in something together to overcome the challenges. So, but yeah, there's lots of ways you can use gated content. It's not just about level caps or putting a wall there where players can't go beyond, or faction. There's a lot of things we're looking at. You know, we've talked about, you know, if you want to track a certain NPC during a quest, you're going to need to have a certain level of tracking, which means you need somebody in your group who can track. But then what happens if you don't have a tracker and you get to the place and you're trying to find clues? Well, then we would have other ways. Let's say there's an alternative method where if you have a scholar in the group, an archaeologist or someone who has a high enough perception, they can actually, oh look, there's, you know, I found these runes carved on this, you know, tree over here, and decipher the runes, and the runes are a message left by the person that they need to go north to find, you know, come north and you can find me in the village of blah. Looking at multiple ways, maybe that's not the case, maybe you find a nearby farmer and you have a high enough conversation skill that you can get the farmer to confide in you and say, oh yeah, Ranger Bob, yeah, he left 2 weeks ago, went over here, you can go find him over here. So looking at multiple ways that players can get around specific moments in quests that are, you know, that require some sort of a skill or some sort of a check to get past. Yeah, Himbar, I mean, I think it's the first time anyone ever said that we're a hardcore game. I'm pretty sure this was probably 3 years ago, but I've come back to this over and over and over. When people say that a game is hardcore just because it requires people to group together, Why? You don't call tabletop gaming hardcore. Why would you call gaming together in an MMORPG hardcore? It makes no sense to me. It really makes no sense. It's like saying bowling is hardcore because you're doing league bowling and, you know, it's you and your 4 friends. I don't know how many people are in a bowling league. I'm using that as an example. Is bowling hardcore because you're doing it as a league? If we were using that as an example of hardcore, then any group-based activity would be hardcore because it has to be done as a group. You can't do it solo. So yeah, it's a conundrum. We get a giggle out of it every time. And there's one particular news outlet who particularly likes to continually claim that we're hardcore, and we just kind of chuckle every time. I think when I think of hardcore, I don't think gated content. When I think hardcore, I don't think group-based gaming. When I think hardcore, I think needing to spend 40 hours camping a mob. A very good example of this is, like, we've got some community members in our Saga of the Sima gaming community who are on Agnar right now working on their epic weapons. I have no desire to do so. And the reason for that is because EverQuest, as much as I love that game, it's too hardcore. EverQuest to me is hardcore. Even the game as it exists today, like if you want to go, like we're in Agnar, and as players are working on getting their epic weapons, we had one guy who spent, I think it was like 3 days camping a specific mob to get this item to drop. And and this in particular individual doesn't have a spouse, doesn't have kids or anything like that, and currently unemployed. So they have the time to sit there and do that. That to me is hardcore because I don't have the time, energy, or the inclination to sit there for 3 days straight and camp an item to get an epic weapon. That's hardcore. Playing 2 or 3 hours here and there, like raiding in EverQuest 2 or raiding in World of Warcraft where it's persistent and you can pick up where you left off and move on in small increments of time, that is not hardcore by any means. But needing to spend all those hours, and I did back in the day, but those are many, many years ago. I wouldn't do that now. So to me, when people call our game hardcore, I just kind of am like, what? Why? How is what we're doing hardcore? Because we're not requiring players to log 80 hours a week to do something. You're going to be able to do it in small increments of time. We're also, something else we're trying to do with the gated content. We look at it and said, as far as barriers of entry go, there's ways that you can make that entertaining. It's not just about putting a limitation in place. It's also about providing a series of tiers that players can progress through that are fun. Challenges that when you overcome. I've often said when in our travel blog that my wife and I have been running for a long time. There's a lot of times when you see solo travelers out there doing things, and I've always said that for me, I've never been a fan of solo travel. And the reason for that is because things are better. Everything in life is better when you're sharing it with someone else. There's a certain element. It's humanity. This is humanity at its very basest form. The camaraderie of human companionship. That's something that you will never, ever, ever obtain when you're doing things on your own. You just don't get it. It's what you did something really cool and no one was around to see it. It's like that saying about if a tree falls in the forest, I don't remember the saying actually now that I'm thinking about it. Something about if the tree falls in the forest, does anyone hear it or something like that. If you accomplish something on your own, okay, cool. But if you don't have someone to share it with, it's not really inspiring. But that's my opinion. That's my take on things. And that's obviously the way we're building our game, is a game that's based on the camaraderie and the friendship and the communication and doing things with other people. Somebody on the Massively thread today actually posted too that, if we're doing gated content, that we absolutely have to have a group finder in the game so that they don't have to spend 2 hours looking for group if you're only going to be playing 2-hour sessions. The only people, and I continually come back to this, finding people to game with is not a challenge. It's not. You just have to be willing to be friendly. You have to be willing to talk to people. You have to be willing to be part of a community. You have to be willing to be outgoing. It's hard. You can even be an introvert. I used to be an introvert. I'm not anymore. But when I was younger, I was definitely an introvert in my late teens and early 20s. And even as an introvert, I've often said I never had problems getting groups in EverQuest. And I was a ranger, which for a long time was not the best class if you wanted to get groups all the time. But it was just a matter of putting myself out there. I found a good guild. I was on the guild forums every single day, lurking, and anytime someone would post a thread that they needed help on something, I was there. Because for me, it was an opportunity to group, and an opportunity to group is experience points and camaraderie and friendship. And if I'm scratching their back, then they're going to be willing to scratch my back when I need help. So it was always about just being there, and it was also very quick. I got into my first guild in EverQuest within the first, I think it was it's been a long time, so I don't remember the exact timeline, but it was very quickly within the first few weeks of playing. But then it wasn't, I don't even think it was a month, and I was promoted to an officer. Even as an introvert, I was promoted to an officer in the guild, just because I liked organizing things. And I was always there. I was always there helping other people, because I didn't have to be opening my mouth. I didn't have to be speaking to people. I didn't have to be, outgoing. It was just I was there. And if you're there and you're present and you're community-based and you're friendly in nature, then groups will naturally find you. You don't need to rely on a gimmick or a button or a group finder to find groups for you, because that takes away from the social component. And we're very much about the social component of gaming. You don't play Dungeons & Dragons by yourself. You play Dungeons & Dragons and you play tabletop games with friends. An MMORPG is a tabletop game in a digital space. You play it with friends. If you want to play a single-player game, that's what games like Baldur's Gate, Mass Effect, Witcher, etc. There are single-player games for that. That's not to say that you can't do things on your own in an MMORPG, because you could do things in the real world on your own as well. I can do a lot of things in my day-to-day life on my own, but then there are a lot of other things that I want to do. A very good example of this, let's put this into perspective right now. I could never have built an MMORPG on my own. It's just not possible. It's not physically possible to build an MMORPG on your own unless you're willing to take 30 years to do it. Because one person can't do everything at the scale needed to create an MMORPG. You need artists, you need programmers, you need engineers, you need management, you need community members, you need customer support, you need a website, you need a lawyer, you need an accountant, you need all of these things that are part of a business as well as part of a game. I couldn't have done that on my own. I can write a novel on my own, and I can self-publish a novel on my own if I want to, but I can't build an MMORPG on my own. That's the perfect example of something that is considered, a challenging piece of content. This would be the equivalent of a raid. I've got to have a team of 20 people to put together an MMORPG. You can't do that on your own. And that's no different than playing an MMORPG. There are certain components of a game that you can do, on your own, but then, the most challenging components require you to get outside of the box and group up with other people and make friendships and commitments, and it's not always easy. It's no different than, a marriage. There's going to be moments when you and your significant other are, you disagree on something, but you work past it, And I always use this as an example. My wife and I, I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form, and my wife is. We still have a great relationship. We sometimes have these, I would call them debates. We don't ever really fight about it, but we do have debates from time to time. I would say maybe 2 or 3 times a year about religious stuff. And they get a little heated, but that's just the nature of it. And with the team, we've got a great team assembled, But there are times when we don't see eye to eye on things, and we have to sit down as a group and say, well, what is the general consensus here? We've got these 3 people saying they like this, and they've got these other 4 people saying this, etc. How do we come about making a resolution? And the best part about it is because we're all adults and we all get along and we're all in this together and we're all friends, it's very easy to come up with resolutions to issues that crop up because we're treating it in a mature manner and we're dealing with it as a community, as opposed to trying to put your stake in there as an individual and say, well, my way is the best way and my way or the highway. You can't do that in life or gaming or anything else. If you want to be part of a community, you have to be willing to think beyond yourself and put aside your selfish ego and put the good of the group ahead of yourselves. A lot of people, I know, I've had friends who, that's so socialist of you. It's like, it's not really socialist, it's just humanity, it's human nature. Sometimes the good of the group is more important than the good of one person. And that's just the reality of things. Anyway, I'm going to start winding down here on this episode of Mondays in MMORPGs, gated content. If you guys have comments on this, feel free to leave commentary over on the forum post. You can also check through on the YouTube, put a YouTube video up earlier. I'll also be putting this up on YouTube later, so you can check that out on my YouTube channel. So feel free to comment. The best place is going to be on the forums, to be honest with you, although I always check my social media multiple times a day as well. But because the forums are a place where the whole community is related, if you have commentary on this, feel free to leave it there. We've already had a couple of good comments on pros and cons of gated content. Obviously, this is something that's still in a state of flux. We're still fleshing it out. We're still developing it. So there's a lot of ways that we can kind of, tweak things as we go along. But again, like I said, it's not something that people should be scared of. It's not like we're making the whole game gated, We're very conscious of the fact that we want people to be able to play this game in small increments of time in a very casual manner with groups of friends, whether it's 2 or 3 people or 6 or 10 people or they're a full guild. And we are very conscious about trying to make sure that the vast majority of the gameplay can be achieved without any sort of gated content in the way. But as far as the book quests go, that is something people need to be preparing themselves for, which is one of the reasons why it's never a bad time to start forming up guilds and finding people. We've already got a very good sized early access community, so if you're a part of that, awesome. If you haven't joined, check out some of our past videos. We've got lots of people in game having fun. We've got 1,000 people or so on the forums. It's growing every day, and we have a very good community who are already coming together, and that's just getting bigger as we go along, and that's all we can ask for. People are liking what we're doing, and that's the best part about this is we started off just doing this, the 5 of us, and doing it for fun and putting things up on Facebook, and then suddenly it was like, hey, can I come work with you guys? You're building an MMORPG, and then here you are 4 years later, and we were at the top 10, the Indie Game Dev Showcase at Austin Game Conference. We got private investment. We're expanding the team. The game is getting bigger, and it's kind of weird in a sense to see your dream coming true. I don't know how many people are in a position to be able to see that. But when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, it was always my dream to write and publish and work in the fantasy realm, whether it was novels and short stories or video games, and to be able to be in this place. And thanks to everybody who's been following along and making this a reality, because it's pretty awesome to be able to do this every day. It's very awesome when I get to see all the different components that come together from the various team members. So anyway, this is episode 10 of Mondays in MMORPGs, gated content. If you have any commentary on it, read through the blog post, let us know on the forums. Don't forget to go back through the past episodes. We've talked about a lot of stuff. We've talked about quests and storyline, corpse runs, no mini-maps, immersion, world versus game. There's a lot of different topics. And we're going to be continuing this series every Monday, theoretically. Every Monday throughout this year and potentially beyond. Now that I am here in Mexico City with fiber optic, which is great, I finally have real internet. This will be going on every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, unless I'm flying or at a convention or for some reason can't be here. And I will always let you guys know if I can't. but otherwise I should be here all the time. And if not, I'll maybe even do some on the road if I have decent connectivity. We'll see how it goes. In the meantime, don't forget to tune in every Monday at 8 p.m. to discuss the latest Mondays in MMORPG episodes. And if you want to watch the Saga of Lusumi community playing other games together in between our pre-alpha access, we're playing Lord of the Rings Online on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I stream those on 8 p.m. Eastern on this channel. Also, let's see, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Wednesdays and Fridays we're playing EverQuest. We're playing Lord of the Rings Online on the Laurelland server, so if you want to join us, feel free, come along. We got quite a few people in the guild, I think 15 or 20. We got around the same in EverQuest active players, and we're recruiting more every day, so you can come join us in the Agnar server. And then I'm also streaming early mornings, so if you get up early in the morning and you have nothing else to do, I started this morning because we just moved into this apartment 3 days ago, or 4 days ago, something like that. So this was my first week back to a normal schedule, so I'm streaming from around 6:30 Central Time, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning till about 9 o'clock in the morning, Monday through Friday. And right now I'm playing Star Wars: Old Republic and also Guild Wars 2. Yes, Himbar, real internet is amazing, because for 8 years I suffered with bad internet in Cancun, and it got to the point where it was just like, look, if I'm gonna do the things I need to do this year, I need to go somewhere where there's fiber optic, and there's not fiber optic there. So it was very nice to, when the guys came and installed the internet, and I did my first speed tests, and it was a 204 up and a 203 down. It's not gigabyte, but hey, it's a hell of a lot better than what I had in Cancun. So yeah. Anyway, lots of stuff coming here. I'm also going to be streaming a lot of other stuff on this channel, so if you like, don't forget to follow along, guys. Please subscribe, share the channel out if you would. I would really appreciate that. Thanks for all your subscriptions. Thanks for all your follows, likes, etc. We're going to be doing a lot of different stuff, so as I wrap this up, because I have to go do a testing and brainstorming session with my Saga Leucemia team, and also later on tonight on the Saga of Leucemia Twitch channel, we should be streaming our first episode of the Developer Diaries series. So stay tuned for that. I don't know when that's going to happen. Probably around, what is it? It's about 9 p.m. Eastern now. Probably around 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll be jumping on the Saga of Leucemia Twitch channel and doing a Developer Diary series. I don't know who we're gonna interview tonight. I don't know who yet. We kind of said we're gonna see who's available tonight after our team meeting and go from there. It's a new series. We haven't done a Developer Diary series since 2015, so we're kind of looking forward to do that. Other things that I'm doing. I'll put my tea back down. So I think last Christmas we said we had an idea for doing a Saga Leucemia medieval themed cookbook. We loved what World of Warcraft did with the World of Warcraft cookbook. We wanted to do something with more of a medieval theme to it. Less of a fantasy feel, more of a medieval feel, because our game is more based on realism. It's not as fantastical as Warcraft is. And I love to cook. My wife loves to cook. Our Airbnb that we ran for the past 2.5 years, my wife was a super host for like within the first month, and we kept that status the whole time through. And if you ever go and read like the reviews, like every single person is commenting on the food, because we just love to cook. A big part of our travel blog has always been going and doing these press tours around restaurants and doing a lot of food tourism, gastronomy. So we definitely have a passion for food. And then we started looking, and we have various community members who are cooking different things. They're doing mead, they're doing ale, they're doing wine, beer, all these different things. So we had this idea for a cookbook last Christmas, but we put it to the side because we weren't quite ready to do it. But now that we're here, we just moved in. We just ordered a brand new set of cast iron cookware, and we're getting set up right now. And then within the next week or two, probably not this week, probably next week, I'm going to be starting to work on that. My wife's going to be helping me a little bit. So you guys may get to see her a little bit. I think a lot of people don't know who she is. If you follow our travel blog, you definitely know who she is, because she's been a part of that for the last, I think 5 or 6 years. But she's not a part of Saga of Leucemia. She's not a part of Stormhaven Studios. She's going to be helping me with that aspect, so we're going to be doing a lot of recipes, and hopefully by July, maybe August, we'll have the cookbook ready for people. That's something I'm working on in my spare time outside of what I'm doing with all the rest of this stuff. I just finished I spent about 3 hours a day working on my query letters for agents, so we're going to start looking for some agents for the Volume 1 novel to see if we go with a publisher or whether or not we self-publish. So I'll be keeping you guys updated on that. I'm probably going to start doing some handcrafted leatherworking, making some dice bags and stuff. I've got the ongoing work in the tabletop game. There's lots of stuff that's going to be coming to this Twitch channel, and I'm going to be basically streaming at all hours of the day. But for now, the schedules are Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Friday nights from 8 p.m. Eastern onwards. Lord of the Rings Online and EverQuest, and then in the mornings from about 6:30 to 7 a.m. Until about 9, I'm going to be playing Star Wars: Cookbook and Guild Wars 2. And then as I start getting into the cooking and other things, we're going to start doing random streams at 11 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, etc. So just doing lots of different stuff here on the Twitch channel. So definitely follow along. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys a bit on the Saga Leucemia Twitch channel, where we're going to be talking about something related to the development of our game. See ya.